and great opportunities, much better than we could have expected 7 years ago. And therefore, we enter our 8th decade of existence with great optimism and looking forward for an even brighter future. Thank you so much.
Just a quick picture, and then we're short on time.
So I'm about to bring up Gloria and Starr, who Skipper Dipple connected us with. She's been covering the United Nations as a correspondent for more than 40 years. So she will be a nice intermission between, she'll be a nice speech in between right now and our lunch speaker, who's the Undersecretary General of Gloria, who heads peacekeeping. We do just a couple of logistics. We do have a fast turnaround, so we will need to leave here at 1 o'clock on our private tour, so we need to take everything with you. And the tours will last about 45 minutes. Plan for some time, because I'm sure folks are going to be picking up souvenirs in the gift shop. And then we're going to head down to Wall Street, which no matter how you go is going to take a little more than 30 minutes. Lieutenant Governor Dan Haddock is going to be joining us to ring the bell, and we'll be providing remarks as well as the New York Stock Exchange executives. So let me right now introduce Gloria. We are so excited to have you here today.
Well, I'm glad I'm still alive. I've been in the UN since 1957. It's a long time. And I started in the UN when I was very young. I was a kid. I was a D in school. I was D+. And at the time, I went to one of these sort of nifty private girls' schools. It was in the Hotel Plaza, Elite New York, whatever. And no matter what I did, no matter everybody tried with my father's influence, whatever, I was still a D+. But luckily, I had been brought up in France, and my mother was Spanish. I'm a cocktail d'amour. My mother was Spanish Catholic, and my father was dynamic Jewish brain, which I hope I've inherited. I don't know, I'm trying still. But because of it, I've always been entranced by the United Nations. And because I was such a rotten student, my principal, Elizabeth Moslin, got interested in me. She thought there's something wrong. When I talked to her, she seems alive. But when I put her in front of a paper, it's 0. But she began to use me as a test case, I think. And she took me to the Herald Tribune forums, which were sponsored by Osborne Elliott at the time, because I was, by chance, the only child in the whole school of 100, mostly waspy kids, so I was unique. But I spoke French and I spoke Spanish, and she got intrigued by me. So she thought, what am I going to do with this kid? So she took me herself to the Herald Tribune forums. And that started me with international politics, talks like this, which I think are incredible. I'm thrilled to be here as long as I've been in this building. I'm excited that I can meet important people from the Ford Foundation or anybody elite from the Republican group, the Bush administration. I don't know how to get to them. I know everybody in the UN, but not everybody outside of the UN. But part of my feeling is, and I saw here some younger people, you're very, very important. You're the future. You, and there's even one 14-year-old here. This is the future. And I think it's wonderful that her father brought her and his 18-year-old son, because this is the future. The children understanding the importance of their fathers and mothers and the thinking, and going with them and learning the trade. This is what made many of the famous families, they've been bottle-fed like the Kennedys from the day they were born on international and American mainly politics. So I see this as very key. And I'm just going to sit down a minute. So, my story about the UN and my love of the UN. Now I was at a fancy lunch with a girlfriend of mine, Zita Heimler, and she was as bad as I was at school. Her father was the head of Longi Littauer watches, which she had everything anybody would ever want. And at age 16, she said, I'm not going to school anymore. They didn't even homeschool her. They didn't care. She said, I like art. I want to be an artist. So Zita, who also was a dud in school, became one of the most famous artists in New York City. She became the enfant chérie of every living room. Everybody wanted them to do their portraits. First, I think because they were impressed by who her father was, but after that they realized the kid really was good. So she became one of the most famous artists. Part of the reason I'm saying this is, I read about the pressure on children today in schools. I read about suicides. I read about emotional problems. I'm saying to all of you, whatever child you have in your family, look twice. There's a lot of talent in that family that you're not looking at. Don't look only at school marks. I really think it's key. And even recently, Qatar had a group of autistic children here in one of the smallest salons living rooms and invited some of the ambassadors. It wasn't too many, or the kid would be scared to death. But they had about 6 children from Qatar, autistic, and they had a marvelous orchestra. And I then realized, and I've been told since then, that autistic children are musical geniuses. They don't even need to read from the script. Now, that was my one thought today, because I feel it's so important, and I'm very involved myself in GOCHA, which is, it's a UN foundation, and this UN foundation is encouraging youth. These are the youths who are part of the Arab Spring. They're a part of, and I'm not asking if you like it or not, but that's what brought in President Trump, because he's different, he's unusual. It appealed to them, his art of the deal, it became interesting. Now, my other thought is, I think you notice when anybody important speaks here on the dais, you must all get to know that person who spoke, because they only had 10, 15 minutes, and that's not a lot. Like with the Consul General of Israel. Going back to my start in the UN, which ended up my going out to Lake Success at age 17, and running around the building, and nobody cared at that point. Interestingly enough, most of them spoke either French or Spanish, and a lot of them didn't speak English, so they're glad to even shake hands with a kid who could talk to them. And then I met a lot of them, and I said, would you come to my home in New York and meet my mother, especially the Spanish ones, and from Latin America? And they said, sure. And they came and I introduced them to my mother. And then my father, who came here as a kid at 18 from Germany, which is now part of it, was not the stylish part, it's now Lithuanian, but Lithuania, whatever. But my father became one of the biggest businessmen in America. He came here after the World War, where he fought as an American, and where he was very helpful to the American Army because he spoke German, and was a European and understood the head. But I think more important than that, when he came back, he decided to go into textiles. I'm sure he didn't know anything about textiles, but in those days they worked 24/7. and they had meager resources. And I don't know how my father did it, but my father became one of the biggest dress manufacturers in America. His name was Starr. And he pushed his kids. My sister graduated Wellesley at 16. My brother graduated Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. And I got married early and fast to get out of the situation. He was pushing me and I couldn't win. So I'll get married, I'll make him happy, I'll have a couple of kids. So now we go back, I'm in Larchmont, New York, and I'm a young married. And I was still interested in the UN and had a couple of friends and people there. So on a Sunday, in those days, we're going back a long time into the 60s and further down, there were only 57 countries. And as the UN grew, I'm one of the few people who watched them grow and grew mentally with them. I learned as each ambassador came from each country, and I became a UN journalist, I was able to be sassy and ask questions, and I got to be quite clever and informed about all of the 190 somewhat countries in the UN. I know them like a book. Ask me about any country. And you guys are from Texas. You want to do something with the UN, with all these foundations and all of these opportunities, public-private partnerships. It is there. And if you have any problem, I'm even in the telephone book still, 212-628-1743. And I'm thrilled the people are here from Texas. Really thrilled. And I'm impressed that you're here and that you care and want to know. And I can tell you, with all the ranchers here, you have the importance of genetic breeding. You can get a good cow and get that cow to produce with a mix from Texas. I think Bangladesh did it at one point. You mix the cows and breed them with between Bangladesh and Texas, you get a bottle of more milk a day. That's a lot when you have a hungry family. And those guys in Bangladesh, they're Muslim, they breed like Israel. Israel is, everybody has a lot of children in Israel. Same thing in Bangladesh. Tons of children, so they need the bottle of milk. And I was very honored and very pleased to see the Consul General of Israel here. I have followed him. I've listened to many of his speeches and gone to many functions. He's so clear and so precise. But do you realize that Israel, I don't know, I should have asked him, the ambassador is still here, what is the population of Israel? I think it's about 6 million.
9.
How many?
9.
9 million. They're the biggest trading partner of India, the biggest. 3 billion people. Can you imagine this country? You talk about development, you talk about technology, you talk about medical, it's all there. And I, by the way, knew Iran. I'm so damn old, at this point I can't hide it, what am I gonna do? But I'm so damn old that even at the UN, when I was 17, I met the first delegation of Iran. Now that was not Shah Pahlavi's era. It was his father's era. The chief financial officer of Iran was a man named DDR, and in those days they didn't have last names. Everybody was called the son of DDR. The next generation was his son, Mohsen DDR, and he used 2 names because he'd been educated in London and in Belgium and gotten more westernized. But Mohsen DDR was about 28, already an ambassador, and very sophisticated, having been brought up in Europe and open-minded. His best friend was the chief mullah, Ahmad Ashchani of Iran. These guys drank like fish. They danced all night. They loved beautiful women. They had the time of their life in New York because it wasn't the same in Iran. No matter what, they were under stricter rules. So Now, when I hear what happened with Iran, and the most cultural, gorgeous, wonderful country in the world, elite and magnificent art and open-minded, it's hard to believe what happened. When you realize that the everlasting light today is in every Jewish temple was in gratitude to Iran for helping them with Egypt. I can't believe what I hear and see. But I do know the population in Iran, particularly the younger, want relations with America. And any way we can get to those young people and be able to communicate is important. On the North Korea, South Korea, this has been a long time. Many Koreans who have relatives there, I think for the last 30 years, many Koreans have been working to be in touch with their relatives. They have poured fortunes into trying to get as many of their relatives they can out, and they have spent fortunes in America trying to find out how can they somehow or other have relations with North Korea. And some of our Americans, like Stapleton Roy, who was our ambassador to China, and China's involved with North and South Korea. Stapleton Roy has been at a lot of events like this, and he's been encouraging dialogue. Also, Admiral Owens was from America, covering that part of the world. And many of our great generals like Petraeus. So I think where Trump is going, most Americans, I think, are pleased with it, happy with it, and I think his unusual tactics is excellent because North Korea, you wouldn't call them normal or usual. I mean, his best friend is Rodman. So I'm all for the unusual. Now I'm going back to something else that I learned in the UN, and I also learned from my own father, because my father had word of honor. If he said to me, today we're going to go and get ice cream, I knew I was going to go and get ice cream. And if I knew maybe I was going to get some small dumb favor, like doing what I want to do at certain hours, or even because I was a girl, getting another dress I didn't need, my father kept his word, and he said, you're going to have it. Now we go back to the UN. There is in the UN the Gentleman's Agreement. It's about morality. One country gives its word to another country. They honor it. And the ambassadors here are the negotiators of this Gentleman's Agreement. It became actually a little difficult because, interestingly enough, there's a language liability here in the building. What does really aggression mean? How do you define it? How even is human rights defined? Because some of these totalitarian countries don't even know what human rights is. They take it for granted. But the morality of the Gentleman's Agreement, if you can get two countries, two ambassadors, foreign ministers, and the heads of state to be more flexible, and when they make a decision, to give their word and not change the next day. And this has become weakened worldwide. In the early start of the UN, a Gentleman's Agreement was the ambassadors between the countries, a report to the foreign ministers, and it was locked in, and it was understood that these countries honored their word. That's gone, unfortunately. And it's very sad. Now I'll talk, I don't know how long I have to talk because I don't have my meter, but I'll be told how much longer.
The Undersecretary is here,
Okay, but well, he is one of my gods. He's peacekeeping. So I'm going to close it with two quick ones. That was during the missile crisis, when, and I'm sure this gentleman will remember it, when Russian guns were in Cuba, the UN had a big part, and Ambassador Baruti filibustered for 3 days so that the US and Russia could cool off, and we have a major role. And I'll let the General take over now, and I'm honored and pleased, and thank you for joining me.
I will say that it has been a joy to get to know Gloria. She absolutely knows every single person in New York and has offered to make numerous connections with each and every one of you. So if you're coming and you want to explore global relations or the United Nations here in New York City, please reach out and I'll connect you to Gloria if you haven't already been connected.